Hey Salem, Austin, one of the pastors, and wanted to check in with you about our plans for worship today with this rain, but then also into the fall and the winter. And so I just want to reiterate that we as a church believe a couple things are really important. One is that worshiping together is essential, it's an essential part of the Christian faith. Second is that we believe that the Lord's Supper is something that we should take as often as we possibly can. And we believe that, thirdly, to take the Lord's Supper together, that should be accompanied by the preaching of God's Word in an embodied setting where we are together physically. And thankfully, we've had an amazing stretch all the way back to July where we have not really had inclement weather on a Sunday. And so we've had months of gathering together and taking the Lord's Supper, and that's been really, really awesome. And the weather is sure to change and be a little bit more difficult, but because we've figured out this rhythm, we think that we will not cancel worship and go with the only streaming route unless things drastically change with the pandemic. But our plan is to continue to offer outdoor worship services, even to the point of whether it's raining or not, and I'll get to that in a moment. But I do want to acknowledge that it would be ideal if we were in the building, huddled together, without masks, singing our hearts out. That is what is ideal. So when we groan for that, that is a good thing. But we want to acknowledge that no matter what we do right now during this pandemic, it's going to be different. It's either going to be with masks or outside or both. It just doesn't seem wise for a church to do what it normally does, which is to have unmasked people inside of a building singing together and close together. So here are the reasons that we are hoping to continue to have outdoor worship all through the fall and into the winter, and how we want to do that. So first, we're not going to be going back into the building for the foreseeable future. Part of that is because Calvary Moravian is not in their building. And so we're very thankful for their hospitality, and we're going to follow their lead with whatever they do. So we're not going in the building before they are. That's one thing. But regardless of what they do, we really don't want to go into a situation where we have to have reservations or a limited amount of seating. So we're also not going to go into the building unless we can fit everyone who comes to our church. And right now that doesn't seem possible with social distancing, which we think would be really important even if people are wearing masks if we were going to be inside. Another factor to think about is the fact that the church has actually grown. And that is because we are offering the sort of the safest option we can while still trying to be faithful to the fact that we think Christians should gather in an embodied way. What I mean by that is to say that there are people who have restrictions because of their job or where they go to school or because of athletics that say they can't go to gatherings indoors or gatherings with large groups or things like that. And by following all the best advice, by having the trifecta of masks, being outdoors, and being socially distanced, we're making it as easy as possible for as many people as possible to come and be a part of the church. And of course, some of you might be comfortable with not having masks outside, or some of you might be comfortable with wearing masks but being inside. But by doing those three things together, being outside, being masked, and being distanced, we're doing the most possible for the most number of people to be able to participate in our church. And it's even been a beautiful evangelistic thing that Ben's mentioned in the emails, where there are people driving by, there's people stopping, there's people who found the church during this time, and people who've not been to church before have started coming to church. And so it's strange and remarkable, and we don't want to tinker with what the Lord is doing in that way. The third thing is that it's shaping us as Christians. What I mean by that is that it's this rhythm of gathering outside in this different way, I think, is shaping us to think about what is worship for us. I saw an article this week, which I'll link in the email, that talked about another article from the Washington Post that someone was criticizing, saying, or they were not criticizing, they were saying that it is essential that people be able to protest. And I agree with that, and I think, but where the article aired and where this other article was critiquing it was saying that they said there's something different about protesting than there is about going to your local worship service or going to a restaurant for brunch. And in that situation, what the author of the first article was essentially doing was likening church not to the essentiality of protest, but instead to the consumerist recreation of going to brunch. And that's not what church is for me, and I don't think it is for many of you. And so we're really having to contemplate that in a way that we don't normally have to. And that's a beautiful thing. Another thing that I've been thinking a lot about is the biblical Babylonian exile. If you want to read about it, you can read about it in the book of Daniel. I've actually been reading Daniel because of that. But I've also been dabbling in Ezra and Nehemiah. If you read those together and think about times when God's people were not in their home, but then when they could return, how sweet that was. I think of us as a people in exile, not at all in the ways that historic Christians have. We are not suffering by any means. Our suffering at most would be getting a little wet. But it is hard. It is really hard. It's especially hard for those of us that are losing work or living alone or trying to figure out how to do homeschooling or bring children to church. It is really hard. There is an exile here. But I just mean in the worship service sense, it's not the same as persecution. But that being said, I think that we are being shaped as Christians to think about the fact that worship is essential. It's something we want to fight for. It's not a choice we make each Sunday to figure out whether it's going to be part of our menu of weekend choices, but instead it's a thing that actually brings us life and makes us more human. And I love that idea, and I love the idea of us gathering in this strange season in a really creative way that fights for both evangelism by being hospitable to people, by sacrificing the comfort of being inside to make it possible for more people who can't find a church to have a place to come. That's one of the reasons we meet at 5 o'clock. We've always chosen to meet at 5 o'clock because there are plenty of good churches that meet in the morning. And so by being the outdoors 5 p.m. church, we're offering something different in the city that makes it possible for other people to be reached. So that's a really beautiful thing that people in exile like us can do to welcome in the strangers on the sojourn of faith during the pandemic. And I'm going to link also a Bible Project video on the biblical theme of exile that I think would be helpful in framing this point for you all. So to wrap it up, things that we're going to do, first of all, we're not going to change our time or our location. Like I was just saying, we meet at 5 p.m. and even when daylight savings comes, we think we have some good options to help us manage being outside when it's starting to get dark. And we're going to keep meeting on the lawn of Calvary because it's beautiful and it's wonderful. Another thing we're going to do, fix the Wi-Fi. So sorry for those of you who have tried to stream from home. We're going to continue to stream every service, and we want to make that possible. We know not everyone can come gather in person. We just want to make sure that that option is always there. So there will always be the in-person and the streaming option. So I have to especially take responsibility for that because I've been the one that's been messing it up. Every week that Ben's been in charge of it, he's totally nailed the Wi-Fi. So we're also going to add an FM transmitter. We'll see how that goes. We're going to try it in the next couple weeks. I have the FM transmitter. I've spoken to my father-in-law who has some experience with that, and we're going to try to put out an FM signal so that people could be in person at Calvary and take the Lord's Supper, but if you have to get in your car because it starts raining or it's just too cold or you just need to keep little ones buckled in a seat, then you would be able to hear the worship service in your vehicle. We'll see. No guarantees that that's going to work, but we're going to try it. I was thinking about the Postal Service, not the band, the historic institution in our country, and they have this old motto that was neither snow nor rain nor heat nor gloom of night stays these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed routes. And I was thinking that for the Lord's Supper for us, that neither snow nor rain nor heat nor gloom of night stays these Christians from the swift completion of worshiping their God and taking the supper that he's offered them. So I want to close by just saying, let's be really positive. This is super weird. It would be great if we were inside, but we're not. And the pandemic's not over. And so won't it be interesting to have spent a fall and a winter of your life worshiping outdoors? You would know what it's like for people in developing countries and how they worship. You'll know what it would be like for historic Christians. And I think there are actually some fun ways to cast it. So I'm just pleading with all of you to have a positive, excited, creative attitude. First of all, blankets. I must confess that I love being outside all the time. I love layers. You can wear long underwear and then a top and then a sweater and then a cozy jacket with a hood, and then bring like a nice blanket that has like a fleece inside of it, like this one, and get real cozy in like a camping chair. If you want tips on layers or keeping warm, it's kind of like a hobby of mine. I pretty much love to be outside all the time, so I'm sorry, I'm sure that has influenced my excitement that you might not have. But another thing to think about is I would love for us to be the strange church that fills up Camino and Footnotes at 4:45 to order coffees and teas, to have warm beverages. Just think of the idea of being outside with blankets, huddled up with your friends or your roommates, your family, whoever you're having quarantine space with, and staying warm, drinking warm beverages. Even if it's raining, at least Wake Forest students, if you have a beach tent or something, I hope you'll bring it. This is a bit of a passive-aggressive challenge to you, but if Duke students can camp out for months to get basketball tickets, I really believe that you guys could set up some tents to be in worship during the rain. So I would love to see our church be this weird church that has pop-up tents when it's raining and people in cars, and when it's not raining, or maybe there's even snow on the ground, and we have lanterns and headlamps and warm beverages and blankets. And then of course Calvary also has those beautiful lampposts that really light up that lawn. And then we're also going to put the bulletin online still, so that it will be available digitally on your phone or a tablet, so you'll be able to read things. If you need any help with any of that, let us know. I just want to say this quote to you as my closing remark, which is that this may be the most memorably enchanting and challenging season of church that you experience in your whole life as a human being. And I would love to try that adventure with you all. So let's go and try that. And someday we will gather again in the Calvary Sanctuary, and we will sing Psalm 126, that when the Lord brought back the captive ones of Zion, we were like those who wept and laughed. All right.